Ladies and gentlemen, I very nearly decided not to come today. Yesterday, a British soldier was decapitated in cold blood on the streets of London by Islamists shouting Allahu Akbar. One of them told the British public, "You people will never be safe." Why should I, a married father of 4, take the risk of questioning the religion of peace at a public debate that will be filmed and no doubt appear on the internet? I have met Ayaan Hirsi Ali, who was forced to live in hiding and then to leave Europe after her friend Theo van Gogh suffered the same fate as the soldier in Amsterdam. I have met the historian Benny Morris, who was assaulted outside the London School of Economics by Muslim students merely because he was an Israeli. I have British friends who have been forced to move to a secure gated refuge because of similar threats. But I have come precisely because I do not want to live in fear in a free country, our country. I do not want this great university, our university, to become a place where academics are intimidated. I do not want free speech to die in the land that gave this most precious of liberties to the rest of the world, including many of the 56 states that call themselves Islamic. I do not want Muslim women to endure domestic tyranny. The Pew survey reveals that more than 90% of the world's 1.5 billion Muslims believe that wives must always obey their husbands. 90%. Earlier today, I attended the funeral of a dear friend, Professor Geza Vermes, a man whose remarkable career shows what freedom means and why we must fight to preserve it here in Oxford. It was only because he, unlike his parents, survived the Holocaust in Hungary that he ever came here to found the discipline of Jewish studies. Geza was hidden from the Nazis by the church and after the war became a Catholic priest. But later he criticized the church's attitude to the Dead Sea Scrolls, which he insisted should be made available to the academic world regardless of their implications for the origins of Christianity. Indeed, he became a leading expert and was the first to translate them into English. Later, he left the priesthood to get married and decided to revert to his Jewish roots. Here in Oxford, Geza began to investigate what he called the Jewish Jesus, not the Son of God or even the founder of Christianity, but a charismatic Jewish preacher. Geza challenged Christian orthodoxy at every point, though just before he died he also shocked Orthodox rabbis by showing in an article for Standpoint, the not very right-wing magazine that I edit, that crucifixion had been used by Jewish rulers as well as Roman ones. With a foot in both Jewish and Christian camps, but beholden to neither, Geza enlarged our knowledge of the world of Jesus more than anybody else in our time. I've dwelt on his career, the career of Geza Vermes, for one simple reason. None of it would have been possible in any Islamic country. His change of religion would have been treated as apostasy, despite the fact that the Quran suggests only that an apostate will suffer in the next world. Under Sharia law, it is a capital offence, and many Muslim majority countries do in fact impose the death penalty. The latest Pew survey suggests that a majority of Muslims around the world agree with this draconian punishment. Even worse in the eyes of Islamic authority was Geza Vermes' investigation of Jesus. If he had attempted to apply the same modern scholarly methods to the Prophet Muhammad in an Islamic country, he would certainly have been executed for blasphemy as a non-Muslim or for apostasy if he had been a Muslim. One recent example was a leading Islamic scholar in Sudan, Mahmoud Taha, who was executed for apostasy merely because he presented Islam as a religion of peace, drawing on Muhammad's more conciliatory sayings rather than the warlike doctrines he later adopted. Not only would an open-minded intellectual like Geza Vermes have no place in an Islamic country, but a university like Oxford, in which liberty of research into everything, including Islam, is not merely permitted but obligatory, could not exist. There are no universities in this sense in the Muslim world, and the academic study of Islam, and especially of its founder, has been greatly inhibited by the suppression of free intellectual inquiry. Now, how does this lack of free speech and inquiry bear on the question we are debating tonight? In my view, it is crucial. Islam has the potential to be a religion of peace. No, sorry, I'm not taking points of information. But it will need to evolve a great deal if it is actually to become a religion of peace. Islam cannot evolve unless Muslim authorities, both religious and secular, allow the freedoms we in the West take for granted. Freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of conscience. Of course, these freedoms go together with other basic principles which are absent in those countries. Equality before the law, civil and political rights, constitutional democracy, economic liberty, the separation of church or mosque and state. All these ideas emerged in the West because the Judeo-Christian tradition has always evolved in classical and medieval, Renaissance and Enlightenment periods, and it is still evolving today. As a Catholic, I must acknowledge that it is only in my lifetime that the Church adapted its teaching on the Jews from enemies to brothers. And in order to ensure that the 1.2 billion Catholics could see that the Church banished anti-Semitism in its practice as well as its preaching, successive popes have gone out of their way to reach out to Jewish people. How very different is the situation in Islam. Where Jews and Christians have allowed the reinterpretation of the Bible, Muslim scholars have insisted that the Quran, as the unmediated word of Allah, cannot be reinterpreted. Despite this rigidity, Islam did evolve in its early centuries, but since the medieval period, it has undergone successive waves of fundamentalism intended to restore the faith to its original purity and to impose it, if necessary by force, on the rest of the world. We are living through such a wave today, which includes the Wahhabi and Salafist branches of Sunni and the Iranian-inspired Shia Islam. The overall name we give to these movements is Islamism, or radical Islam. Rather than emphasize the earlier, more pacific elements in Muhammad's teaching, such as his Constitution of Medina, which granted equal rights to Jews, Christians and pagans, Islamists emphasize later doctrines, such as the division of the world into the Dar-ul-Islam and the Dar-ul-Harb, the House of Islam and the House of War. We are living apparently in the House of War. Or the draconian enforcement of Sharia law. Not content with the attempt to convert non-Muslims, Islamists stress the obligation to carry out jihad, understood to mean holy war, including terrorism. As we saw yesterday in Woolwich, or a few weeks ago in Boston, radical Islam is not only a threat in the Muslim world, but also here in our midst. It is, in fact, the most direct threat to Western civilization in the world today. It is not enough, it is not enough for Muslim apologists to point to statements of regret after terrorist attacks. They have to acknowledge the truth about their own past and present, the discrimination and cruelty towards non-Muslims, women and slaves that have characterized Islam from its inception. Mehdi Hassan is an exception. In a brave and remarkable article in the New Statesman, he revealed what he called our dirty little secret, that anti-Semitism in the Muslim community is, quote, routine and commonplace, unquote. It was brave because Muslims have reason to fear reprisals when they speak out, and it was remarkable because most Muslims are in denial, encouraged by the pernicious notion of Islamophobia. Because of that notion, the police and other authorities were in denial about the rape and exploitation of girls here in Oxford, an evil that was only exposed at their recent trial. But what other dirty little secrets might Mehdi Hassan like to admit? Who else are Muslims, at least of the radical persuasion, inclined to denounce in private? What do they say about Christians and other non-Muslims, including atheists? What about homosexuals or women whose dress or behavior is un-Islamic? We know what Islamic states do to all these and many other categories of people. They persecute and kill them. They claim the authority of Islam, of the Quran, the Hadith, the Sharia, and their own leading scholars. I know there are other scholars who defy the Islamists. I had the honor of meeting the late Zaki Badawi, the founder of the Muslim College, who fought against the influx of Saudi-funded imams into British mosques, who fought for Muslim integration and who denounced the fatwa against Salman Rushdie. But, Badawi lost all these battles. His leadership role has been usurped by Tariq Ramadan, who occupies a chair here in Oxford. He comes from a very different tradition, that of the Muslim Brotherhood, the vanguard of Islamism. To be blunt, Professor Ramadan is an Islamist wolf in sheep's clothing. Beware of him. A religion of peace has to practice what it preaches. I'm almost done. You only have to watch the news of persecution, war and terror from the Muslim world and beyond to find that religion of peace rings hollow. Peace is not on offer to the rest of us except at a price that is unacceptable. The price of submission to the Islamists who increasingly dominate their fellow Muslims across the globe. One of the Woolwich terrorists told onlookers he had committed his carnage because he wanted to bring our troops back so we can all live in peace. Our troops? He had just butchered one of them. That is not only murder, that is treason. Until it is purged of the radicals who preach in its name, until we can feel safe on our streets again, Islam does not deserve to call itself a religion of peace. I urge you to oppose this motion.